Science fiction in anime. We've got the legacy of Astro Boy, the massive influence of Ghost in the Shell, and Akira. To this day, sci-fi, as elusive as it can be, has been there for a long time. Even now we have Pluto getting its adaptation, that Astro Boy legacy is strong as ever. We have Despera coming out from the same people who brought us Serial Experiments Lain and other shows that I'm going to talk about in just a bit. I cannot wait for Despera. I want to talk about the lasting legacy of sci-fi in some of the best shows I've seen, specific to the genre of cyberpunk. Let's go down the iceberg of cyberpunk anime. Obviously all of that is subjective and the line often blurs between sci-fi and cyberpunk, but let's just dive straight in. For years now, anime has been rising in popularity. It's mainstream now. Monoliths like Netflix not only have extensive catalogues and have brought forward availability, where for some shows you'd have had to resort to piracy beforehand, but they actively spend the big bucks and strengthen the industry itself. This was the case for the beginning of The Iceberg, a real popular anime by Netflix. It was received really well and almost reignited interest in a pretty badly received game. Cyberpunk Edgerunners was a great little series. Often in single core anime with only 12 or 13 episodes, series struggle to get you to feel much for the characters, especially if they have other monumental things to do, like introduce a whole alien world and its lore, like Cyberpunk had to do. But Studio Trigger really brought the world to life, and the writers did a great job making a story centered around the main themes of the game too. Body modification, addiction, the underbelly of society, and the dreamlike future being almost a devolution. Edgerunners is faithful to the cyberpunk genre and excels with it. I won't spoil the ending, but it retains a grim outlook and leaves you with a feeling of emptiness that's really profound. It's dismal, and that's the way it should be. A true solid 7 out of 10, if ever there was one. But we can't mention Cyberpunk without bringing up Blade Runner. Both movies are obviously some of the best ever made, but they more recently got an actual anime for the franchise. The 2D Blade Runner Blackout 2022 is a beautiful, almost experimental short anime film. It actually sets a bit of lore for what would be the 3D Blade Runner Black Lotus, a series which came out last year and made for a good deep dive into the concept of replicants, conscious artificial humans. The concept of death and identity, along with the natural clash it brings up, made for some of the most profound movies ever made, and they took that idea in a shockingly original turn for this anime. I'm not usually a fan of CG, but this really is like movie quality, and watching it in 4K just brings those glamorous yet dystopian panoramas to life. 2022 gets an 8 out of 10, and Black Lotus gets a 7 out of 10. To take a dip in the water before we make our deep descent, Psycho Pass is one of the best cyberpunk animes out there. It's a procedural show where the police system has been abolished and replaced with an AI that can scan in real time whether or not someone's vitals and actions qualify them for judge, jury, and executioner. A really fascinating concept which is taken to every corner you'd want to see it go down, including some really great internal political stuff. The guns they use end up just exploding the person in question, so it can be a really tense and sometimes really gory show. I personally love it, but season 1 and the movie is all you need to watch for this one. Maybe even just season 1, as the philosophical foreplay between the protagonist and antagonist really keeps you hooked and on edge. A very deserving 8 out of 10. To begin our voyage to the icy depths, you might be interested in the fact that the next cyberpunk anime I've seen is by Studio Ghibli. It's also a music video. Animating a completely original story for a song called On Your Mark, we take a look at the all too familiar society which is advanced but degrading. It seems a war has broke out and left the exterior of this city as a barren danger zone. There's so much minute storytelling going on in every background, it's really just as chock full as about the same runtime in a Ghibli film. It has those themes of purity and innocence against corruption, and feels like probably the most refreshing Ghibli project out there for those who are used to their other productions. Being about 5 minutes long, you have no reason not to check this one out. It's crazy for 5 minutes to achieve a solid 7 out of 10, but that's Ghibli for you. As we go deeper and the light of day begins to vanish, familiar to some but not all, Ergo Proxy is one of the best shows I've ever seen. I'd wanted to fit this in a video for a long time. This is one of the most philosophical yet surreal anime you can watch. When I watched it, I remember not even being interested in the cyberpunk, but this concept of a world. The people living in it don't even know what happened, but they're already adapted to harsh conditions. And that unquestioning adaptation is just so intriguing for a backdrop. It's not even treated as mystery so much as a piece of art. Ergo Proxy paints a picture, and we really are just left to look at it and pass our own understanding from it. Along the way, there's artificial intelligence gone wrong, old derelict buildings, and a high ruling class in what remains of society. The questions it puts forth and the interactions it does convey are done sublimely. With one episode in particular diving into episodes of human madness, and it's just fantastic. It was done during the very tail end of the Cell era, so there's actually a couple scenes done using them. It blends 2D digital, 2D physical, and 3D CG, furthering the advanced feel that this anime has. It's a dark and dreary mystery. It's a 9 out of 10 from me. I've talked about it before, but I'd still say it's fairly deep. Let's talk about Memories, specifically Magnetic Rose by Satoshi Kon. In the far, far future, an old derelict ship emits an emergency signal. When the crew get aboard and you see the dilapidation of it all, the short film makes you think of ghosts and phantoms, but it soon becomes apparent that the technological advancements themselves are just vehicles to echo our own mortality. At first, I thought Kon was doing his own version of 2001: A Space Odyssey, but really, he uses this piece of science fiction to make a dystopian tragedy, like Ozymandias, that for all the advancement and futuristic paradise we can make for ourselves, all it can ever be is a footnote to our own eventual demise. The image of the ship run by a lonely and rampant AI, a sad tombstone, but a brilliant glimpse into what Cyberpunk is all about. It's an indisputable 8 out of 10 from me. Deeper still, and we have The Running Man, a segment of Neo Tokyo. It's about an extreme race, the Death Circus, in which races go at insane speeds and wagers are placed on whether or not a racer lives. It's a very disturbing concept. When the all-time champion is discovered to be a man who's using telekinesis to off his opponents, it's seen how dependent and overbearing the technological aspect of this world has gotten. When he dies, the race somehow continues, ending gruesomely. Technology overcoming man and the idea of the mind existing within a computational ether is really mind-blowing here, and it's a tense short film that you can sit back and enjoy in about 15 minutes. It's classical animation from the 80s, and it's just glorious eye candy. I'd give it an 8 out of 10 for presentation alone. Now to go back to a director I was talking about before, Yoshitoshi Abe is a very famous character designer. Serial Experiments Lane is one of the only shows that Yoshitoshi Abe worked on that went through the process of cell animation, which gives off this natural, down-to-earth feel and gets contrasted with the digital animation of The Wire, this proto-internet, to disorient and confuses. The style of character design that Abe utilizes in Lane is one that's so understated, so ordinary, that it makes you look at every frame, every movement, and every design with a scrutinizing eye. Creepy yet inviting, complex yet simple, Lane is a chilling precursor to the internet age, and captures its present and future with terrifying precision through the lens of a small girl. As chords start to grow and begin to take over Lane's house, The Wire creates a life of its own, identities of its own. It gives life to the dark side of human thought and brings everything into question. It's probably the anime you'd associate the least with the cyberpunk genre, but it is a part of it, and it's largely due to that clash with identity stemming through technology. The machine truly goes from the sidelines to everything in this show. I love everything about Serial Experiments Lane, and for that I give this one a 9 out of 10. Technolize is the next work that Abe worked on after Lane, and it has a lot more going on creatively than Lane 2. Technolize is this dystopian cyberpunk world where body modification has run rampant. It's comprised of these two societies, Lux and the Surface. When technology and ideal life became reality, the tranquility of life began to impression humanity in a similar way to the behavioral sync mouse experiment, in which the needs of mice were met to the point that half of the population became vacant and distanced, while the other half became wild and uncharacteristically violent. The Surface is this paradise, where there isn't a point in doing anything, and so the designs of the world mimic the artwork of Edward Hopper, of a depressed sunset on an empty field, with a couple of homes strewn about here and there. The city of Lux is this dusty badland with empty cement structures and buildings, and war erupting at every turn. It's a grim tale of contrast once again, one that Abe likes to work on, clearly, and his style leaves his mark on it quite well. Feudalism and nihilism, it has a slow, careful, almost distracting pacing. It's the most dismal and, because of that, darkest anime I've ever seen, and for that reason it gets an 8 out of 10. At the deepest depths of the ocean floor, you might be surprised that this anime came out in October last year, on Netflix too. Exception is an interesting one. The premise is humanity is on its way to a new planet, but with them all in stasis, they use 3D bioprinted replicas to work on the planet's habitation. During the printing process, a solar flare erupts and one of the crew gets printed wrong. It deals with ideas of what it means to be human, the question of a human soul, and the inevitable question of morality. It has CGI, which might put people off. It even reminds me of that time when CGI had that distinctive polygonal style. But it's used here for a very immersive yet creepy environment. It's the thumbnail for the video, and it's something I've never seen anyone talk about just yet. It's also great as a way to convey the strangeness of printing these humans into existence, almost like action figures, and so they kind of have that abstract, unreal appearance. The character design itself is by Yoshitaka Amano, but where most of his work is in 2D, this is in 3D, so that's really interesting. The series isn't mocapped, so it's made like Pixar do their films, where everything is done from scratch. Sometimes it looks a little janky because of it, but I genuinely think it adds some charm to it. No spoilers from me, but it's a hell of a series, especially for one generating such little conversation. I just wanted to talk about some anime that I've really loved for years now, and others that I've just discovered, but they're shows that I've never had the adequate notes to make a whole deep dive video into, but I still wanted to get it off my chest. I love all of these shows, and I recommend you give them all a watch. Thank you to my patrons. You can join them for $1 a month for early videos and scripts, and a couple Patreon exclusive videos too. Thank you everyone, and have a wonderful night.